On Friday, in the funny papers, today's lesson appeared. In Pearls Before Swine, the mouse, and I suppose if we have been called vipers this morning, it's okay for us to hear from mice and pigs as well. Mouse asks, what do you do when an angry driver cuts you off? Do you swear at them? Do you make rude gestures? Or do you cut them off in retaliation? Peace Pig replies, I try to focus on what must be happening in their life to make them so hostile and unhappy. Mouse replies, maybe you're not understanding. And Pig says, no, but I'm trying to be. Peacemaking is our aim today. In the Gospel of Luke, we have this Christmas song that really speaks to us at Advent. Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist, who's been silent for 9 months, finds his tongue, and his song concludes in the tender compassion of God. The dawn from on high shall break upon us to guide our feet. I think our theme is in the way of light, and here to guide our feet into the way of peace. Advent, Christmas, peace. If you're from California, peace is that snow shaker that settles beautifully. If you're from the Midwest where you get snow, it's more like a Hawaii island or something like that, that is your picture of perfect peace. What blocks peace for you right now? Is there one, or maybe it's a list of things that's keeping you? It's a family member's illness or struggle. It's a place in the world that's dear to you. You're from there, or you have relatives there. What is it that's blocking your peace? I'm going to ask you to actually think about that for a moment. Stan, if anybody waves their hand at you, it means they don't have a pencil. Would you write it or draw a little picture of it right next to the logo on the back of your bulletin? What's blocking peace for you? Can you identify one thing? A big thing, or wave at him? Maybe the thing blocking your peace is some preacher asking you to do something during the sermon, and you really are irritated by that. That's okay, too. It's an easier thing to identify anyhow. Okay, now something even stranger I'm going to ask you to do, and that is, if you'd like to keep thinking silently, just put your arm across your shoulder. But if you're okay with sharing with the person next to you, just in a tiny half a minute, 3 words, share what that item is. Okay, you got permission to talk. Things are getting very strange, I know. Okay, I hope there were no accusations. I see that no fist fights started, so we haven't had too many people say, Rocky, you're blocking my peace. That's good. It's really good that you didn't say that. And nor did you even think about it. Okay, so we've got peace on our minds, but we've got John the Baptist in our ears, shouting about making peace. The thing that John contributes to our thinking this morning is his refusal to be tamed. He is an undomesticated voice who reminds us that peace is not just shaking up that snowflake thingy. Peace is something that extends into the systems and the powers of our world. And I used to think that the metaphor to use when you talk about peace was to drop a pebble into the middle of a quiet pond and watch the waves go out until they reach the edges of the earth. I'm not so sure it works that way anymore. I'm not even sure that that's what Luke or any of the Matthew or the gospel writers would have said. I wonder if peace doesn't even begin with announcing to the powers that there's a new in-breaking way of thinking about the world. And as it works its way straight into our hearts. Or maybe it starts at all different places at different times. I'm not sure about how to work the metaphor, but I am sure that we are called not to allow our peace to become domesticated, and just to make sure it's okay between us is all it takes. There's something deeper and bigger that's going on with this call to peacemaking. The Psalm says that where there is no justice, there is no peace. That in order to know peace, one must know justice. The Psalm uses 3 Hebrew words to get into this, to unpack it. You see them in the top left quadrant there. Not important that you remember the words, that you learn how to pronounce them or any of that kind of thing. But it is important to know that even though shalom is translated peace, and mishpat is translated justice, and tzedakah is translated righteousness, those English approximations are sometimes pretty weak tea compared to what the words actually mean in Scripture. Peace and justice, according to this 72nd Psalm, are very close synonyms. They mean almost the same thing. So if you were reading in the order in which the Hebrew words come to us in Psalm 72, you would notice, first of all, that there's this little superscription, those tiny little letters on top that say, of Solomon. What the word of should be translated is not at all clear. It might be written to Solomon. Take that, Solomon. Or in the Solomonic style. Or it might be written by Solomon. And then the psalm opens, God, your mishpat give to the king, and your tzedakah to the king's son. And notice how often those 2 words keep popping up. In verse 3, our versions all, I think, read prosperity to your people. Sounds like a political slogan, doesn't it? Vote Democrat and be prosperous. The word is shalom to your people in righteousness. Solomon is the king who succeeds in ways that no other biblical king succeeds. And he probably fails to the same extent. You know, Solomon is a wise king. He's the king of peace. He's the prosperous king. he's been assigned one job by the book of Deuteronomy. It's in the book of the Kings. It's right in the middle of that book. And it's the law of the king in Deuteronomy 17:14-20. The one job he has is to read the Bible every day. Make a copy of this law and read it daily. And there's some things he's supposed to avoid, which don't sound very Solomonic at all. He's not to accumulate wealth or weaponry or wives. Now, it says not too many wives. I don't know what that line is, but somewhere between 1 and 1,000, you cross that line. For some of us, it's after one wife would be too many, but maybe somebody can handle more. We know Solomon crossed the line. This text counters the king's justice. Oh, if you're wondering about the king's justice, 1 Samuel chapter 8. The people are asking for a king. Eventually they get Saul, but God tells Samuel, warn the people about the ways of a king. Only, again, we're avoiding the translation of this word mishpat because it's warn the people of the king's mishpat, not God's mishpat, but the king's mishpat. And then he goes on to list all the ways the king is going to try to grab stuff. He'll take your daughters to be his perfumers. He'll take his sons to run your chariots. He'll take your flocks and your herds and your fields. It'll all be his by the time this is over. That's the king's mishpat. That's Madison Avenue's mishpat. That's the Security and Exchange Commission's mishpat. That's the military industrial complex mishpat. That's the American way. God's mishpat is described in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 17, 18, and 19, which say, God of gods and Lord of lords makes, guess what? The only word you have to know in my classes to get an A, mishpat. Make mishpat for orphans and widows, and feed and clothe orphans. Actually, it doesn't say it quite like that. It says, God is the God who makes justice for orphans and widows and loves the undocumented aliens. And then it says, and you should do the same. Imitate God, be a peacemaker by turning your life into another way of practicing justice. It's not lawyer up. It's open your pocketbook and your heart and your life to extend what is more than fair to the person who is more than without. How do you do this kind of thing? How can you make peace in Ukraine without having bigger weapons than the Russians have? This month's Sojourner magazine has a short article about the way in which Ukrainians have been working for peace in nonviolent ways for a long time. I grew up thinking that peacemaking was non-resistance. Jesus resisted evil all the time. Peacemaking is nonviolent resistance, according to the witness of Jesus. This artist, Sergei, has a mural in which a sword is being broken. And it stands at the foot of a bunch of tall apartment buildings. It's been standing there since the war, and as far as we know, it's still standing. One of several fragments of peace, I think, is the name of the series of these murals. A way of giving testimony to peace. All kinds of ways Ukrainians have been doing this. They've been making blockades in front of Russian tanks. They've been refusing to teach the new curriculum given by the Russians in the Ukrainian schools. Doctors have refused to turn over their lists to the Russians. Pastors have preached for peace. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have been disappeared, arrested, and killed because they refused to take up weapons, in addition to the many thousands who've resisted evil by using weapons. And who's to know, as a pacifist, what do you do to fix a problem where there are more weapons in the world than anything? These are people that are giving witness to peace, and they're giving us a call this morning. What will it mean for you to be a peace extender? Either with that item that you've already identified as a peace blocker in your life, or in some undomesticated way that God is calling us to give testimony to peace in the face of institutions that shut down witnesses for peace. How do we give a peace witness in those situations? How do we witness for peace when the homeless guy next to us is messing up our property values? He's just making a mess of things anyhow. How do we extend peace? Rosemarie Berger, the author of this article, concludes with words like these: war makes us blind, blind to the good, blind to the humanity of others. And we are called to follow the artist Sergei to be breaking swords in the name of peace. A little footnote: on his murals, Sergei has put in Braille a little note that says, hope. That's next week, isn't it? Or was that last week? Hope, peace, joy, and love continue to build as we practice these ways of peace. I want to invite you to take just a moment to jot down on your page one way in which you'd like to take a step toward being a peace proclaimer in this week. And if you want to whisper it to somebody on the way up to take communion, you can do that too.